Hello YouTube, this is Thomas Judge back once again with another instalment of my ultimate New 52 reading guide. So in order to create this, I actually read the entire DC New 52. That was 3,646 single issues, which took a long time. I used that information and experience to then make a complex map and infographic, which you can download for free as well. And this series is a deep dive and walkthrough of that map and infographic. Today's video is video 10.1, The Edge. Before we go any further, I will stress, no matter how much you think you know about the New 52, I'd strongly recommend that you watch video 0.0, not because it talks about the New 52 per se, but because it uses a lot of the terms and language and jargon and dialogue that I'll be using throughout these videos. So things like volumes with a big V and type J readers, which are terms that I'm really surprised haven't been defined very clearly in a lot of YouTube videos by a lot of other channels. So I do it there, and if you do watch this video and find it all a little bit confusing, I'd strongly recommend you go back and watch the introduction video. The link is in the description below, and that'll give you some terms of reference to work from. So no further ado, here is the ultimate DC New 52 reading guide. Hopefully you've downloaded it, or hopefully you're quite familiar with this by this stage. Today's episode is video 10.1, The Edge. Now in case you're wondering why I'm using that rather odd name, during the New 52, DC actually used terms like the Dark, the Young and the Edge to refer to several of their own lines that didn't fit into neat groups like Superman and Lanterns and things like that. I started off by sticking with that, but I have subsequently kind of evolved and changed that around and rejigged things because frankly, having read everything, I think I've got a better idea of how to do it than DC did. So in terms of zooming in, let's go straight into the centre as always. We've got Flashpoint, and here you've got Green Lantern to the left and Superman to the bottom. And these turquoise circles here are the Young videos, which we did for the last couple of videos. And here, just between Lanterns here, which are green, and the Young here, which are turquoise, are these orange circles. And these represent the narrow part of the family that is what I call the Edge. The first one to discuss is the lowest one here in that part of the family, so the lowest line here, which is Deathstroke. So this is quite a substantial part of the Edge family, and I'll talk you through as clearly as I can. Now this is Deathstroke Volume 2. What that means that this is the second series named after the character, so as I often say, this is the second volume with a big V. Many of you may be familiar with this character from the Arrow TV show, but if you're not, don't worry, you don't need any prior knowledge whatsoever before starting to read this. What we're looking at here is the cover of Volume 1, that's a volume with a small v, and that's Volume 1 Legacy. Contains issues 1 to 8. That then continues on here, further down the line to Volume 2, which is called Lobo Hunt, and that contains issues 9 to 20 and issue 0. At this point the series is then cancelled, but I suspect that is in part due to the character being relatively unknown and relatively niche. This changes relatively soon after cancellation as the Arrow TV show becomes increasingly popular, prompting DC to relaunch a third series, which is Deathstroke Volume 3, and that's volume with a big V. So we're going to follow this line along. It goes past the Forever Evil line there, and what we have here is the cover of Deathstroke Volume 3, volume with a big V, and Volume 1 of that, which is volume with a small v, is called Gods of War and contains issues 1 to 6. So I say again, that's called Gods of War, contains issues 1 to 6 of Deathstroke. Now, if we continue to follow that line along to here, we've got the cover for the second trade collection. Oh, sorry, it's a bit hard to zoom in accurately there. Second trade collection is called God Killer and contains issues 7 to 10 and Annual 1. Continuing that line along, we just go past the convergence line and we end up here with Volume 3, which is called Suicide Run. You'll see it's got Harley Quinn on the cover, and it contains issues 11 to 16. And then finally, following that line along right to the very bitter end, you've got Volume 4, which is called Family Business, contains issues 17 to 20 and Annual 2. Now, as well as there being all of these available in trade paperbacks and no regular size hardcovers as far as I'm aware, there is an omnibus of this content, which collects issues 1 to 20 and Annual 1 and 2. So That means that's all the stuff drawn by Tony Daniel, who's quite the fan favourite. And please note that that is, again, as far as I'm aware, everything in the third volume. So in other words, that doesn't include the first 2 volumes that we just discussed. That only includes the 4 we can see here, which is, as I said, Deathstroke Volume 3, volume with a big V. So that contains these 4 in one omnibus, and I'll be showing that on screen. However, I frankly didn't enjoy this run on Deathstroke. I'm going to be honest for this. The reason for that is because I don't like any comics that take a character with some defined characteristic and then smooth them out for the sake of them making them more generic, more quote-unquote relatable, and easier to write. I hated it in the movie Infinity War when Thor got his eye back, a movie that seemed to render a lot of the end of the movie Thor Ragnarok meaningless. And I hated it here. They randomly decided to make Deathstroke, which was a grizzled old mercenary with one eye, into a much younger guy with 2 eyes a few issues into his run. Like, not cool. It's like making a gay character straight or a black character white just so the writer finds them easier to write. I'm not impressed by this trend that DC has. It's the same reason I was wary of getting Barbara Gordon out of the wheelchair and back as Batgirl, although that ended up being dealt with really, really well. Anyway, rant over. This run was kind of popular, so please feel free to investigate. Okay, given we're down here, I'm just going to zip over to this one, which is just after the Convergence line. This is the series Lobo. Now, the New 52 version of Lobo is substantially different from his pre-New 52 incarnation. Whereas classic Lobo was kind of a caricature of 90s badassery, this Lobo is more of a sleek, stealthy assassin figure. It's an interesting reimagining, but feels a bit generic in the end. In 2019, grizzled, cigar-chomping action figures are getting thin on the ground, and what would have been a cliche in the 90s would actually be a rarity now. Similarly, this new sleek and lethal modern Lobo feels like any other modern action hero you care to name from the last 5 years. So it's kind of, I guess, maybe it's done deliberately, maybe it's a satire, maybe it's pointing out that whereas in the 90s you would have had this grizzled, over-the-top extreme hero, and that's a cliche, whereas now in 2019 having this sleek, stealthy, super cool hero is also a cliche of its time. But who knows? Anyway, the reason I touch on this here is that the classic 90s version of Lobo actually turns up in the last series we discussed, Deathstroke. In fact, in issue 9 of the earlier series he appears briefly, and that is the old 90s grizzled cigar-munching version. Now the series we're looking at now, which is Post-Convergence, is a standalone series and starts off with that Lobo, the 90s grizzled extreme version, being revealed as an imposter by the real Lobo, the sleek 2019 version you can see on the cover here. So this volume is volume 1 and called Targets. It contains issues 1 to 6. So moving along, we can see that then continues and concludes with volume 2, which is called Beware His Might. That contains issues 7 to 9 and annual 1. Now, there are remaining 4 issues of Lobo, and many people believe these are uncollected. However, that is not the case. The remaining issues are collected, weirdly enough, in Sinestro, volumes 3 and 4, which we covered in video 4.2. Now, I've got the Lobo stuff here. If we go up, we see Deathstroke, and up here actually is Sinestro. So, to be honest, minor oversight on my part. I should have really orchestrated it so that Lobo was above the Deathstroke line rather than below it, so that it would be nearer Sinestro volumes 3 and 4, which is where the remaining Lobo issues 10 to 13 are actually placed. In fact, annual 1 is reprinted there as well. That's an oversight on my part. I did try my very best to make everything grouped physically on this map, but I'm only human. So on that note, that leaves us with just a couple of random series left to discuss, which don't really fit in anywhere else. If you go back to the top, we will see here next to Deathstroke, we've got OMAC. That's OMAC. OMAC was released from 2011 to 2012 and contains issues 1 to 8. It's not very good, and just in case you know something about OMAC in the DC universe before 2011, in the New 52 this has basically nothing to do with Batman. If you think it's to do with Batman, that's because you're thinking of pre-New 52 stuff. However, in the last issue, OMAC does join the Justice League International, and he does feature in a small role in Forever Evil. However, neither of those series requires you to read this first, which is quite useful because this was not a good series. If we just drop up a little bit, you'll see there I've also got Men of War, which is a new 52 series, which ran from 2011 to 2012. It's short-lived. It only had 8 issues in it. And much like GI Combat, which I'll mention later, it was a refresh of a much older series that was published from 1977 to 1980. Now, despite one of these issues also being collected in the Frankenstein series, this has nothing to do with anything in the rest of the DC universe, really. But I have to admit, I actually really enjoyed it. I had a soft spot for the tone, for the writing, and the characterization. I can't defend my actions, it's totally a personal choice, but I bought it. So, whilst that's the end of Men of War, you can see a line coming out of it just because it was kind of replaced by another series, which I've got here as GI Combat. So, GI Combat is an interesting series, just because of the way it was structured more than anything else. It ran from 2012 to 2013, so it replaced Men of War on the shipping schedule. This volume here, you can see, which is just called GI Combat, contains issues 1 to 7 and issue 0. Now, GI Combat was actually a series of anthology stories, so every time you bought a single issue, it had multiple different stories in it. In particular, it collected the multi-issue arcs of a series called The Unknown Soldier, The War That Time Forgot, you can see the dinosaur on the cover here, and The Haunted Tank. None of these are very good. If you do Google this, please be aware that there was a much older DC series by the same name with the same anthology format that ceased publication in 1987. Anyway, so GI Combat got cancelled, and then we've got the Forever Evil line, and if we continue along, we then get to the series that replaced GI Combat, which was, now I know here it looks like it's called GI Zombie, but technically this is called Star Spangled War Stories featuring GI Zombie. So you might find it categorized sometimes under S or sometimes under G. So this ran from 2014 to 2015. It contains issues 1 to 8 and a Futures End one-shot of Star Spangled War Stories featuring GI Zombie. Like the last two series, this is a refresh of a much older series that was published from 1952 to 1977. Now, I'll be honest, from the title, Star Spangled whatever, I expected this to be some goofy, zany fun. Far from it. This is a dark, gritty military story about an undead with the heart of a hero. It's worth a read, but it's not perfect. And that's pretty much it, apart from, and you would have noticed this that I scrolled past earlier, this weird little trilogy of things here. This is odd. These are 3 series called respectively The Ray, to start with, then Phantom Lady and Dollman here, and then a series called Human Bomb. These 3 series are all by Justin Gray and Jimmy Palmiotti, and they're all relaunches of characters from the supergroup Freedom Fighters. Don't worry if you've never heard of them, most people haven't, I hadn't, and is not important when you're reading this. So these 3 short series are 4 single issues apiece. I picked them up as single issues, I read them having no idea what they were or where they fit in. It took a while to put it together in my head, but then I am a type J reader. The reading order is as shown. You should really read the 4 Ray issues, then the 4 Phantom Lady and Dollman issues, and then the 4 Human Bomb issues, but it does not matter, to be honest, what order you read this trilogy of miniseries in. They can be read as standalones. At the same time, they are clearly a trilogy that form part of a larger whole. That larger whole isn't very interesting or very good in my opinion, and none, as far as I'm aware, are collected in trade collections, either as a whole collecting all 12 issues, or as 3 separate ones collecting 4 issues each. I have no idea. I've never seen that anywhere. I don't think that exists. Correct me if I'm wrong in the comments below. So if you are going to read these, probably end up doing it the way I did, which is single issues only. So let's zoom out. And that was the Edge subfan. There's actually not a second video in the Edge series because we covered it all today. But next time round, we're going to be talking about a series of comics that I call the New Storm. If you want to do a bit of revision or prep for that, it might do you some good just to do a quick skim of the Wikipedia entry of the comic line called The Wildstorm. The New Storm is, in my mind, part of that. Okay. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, please like, comment, subscribe, and share more widely. As always, I'm really interested to hear your thoughts and comments. Tweet me at IamThomasJudge or comment below. As always, these videos are only possible thanks to your support by heading over to Amazon and picking up the first volume of my prose novel, No Gods or Kings, over 200 pages for less than $1. It's sort of a cross between World War Z and Watchmen, in that it's a series of interviews from a future where superpowers are real, and the entire world has changed dramatically as a result. If you've got Kindle Unlimited, it's already free, but I still would really appreciate you downloading and reviewing it. For those of you that want to download the map and infographics I use for these videos, they're available on the same website as my book, nogodsorkings.com, which is also where you can find a free excerpt. So whilst you're there, why not pick up the book and support the channel? Until next time, stay classy.